Charlotte. Jeff is a contributing editor to Harper's Magazine. He has been a frequent guest on this show for his coverage of The Family, the secretive religious organization best known because it runs C Street, the infamous home for lawmakers in Washington, D.C. that's been tied to a number of political sex scandals this year. As Jeff has previously reported on this show, The Family is directly connected to the Uganda Kill the Gays legislation. And Jeff joins us now to bring us some new reporting on that subject tonight. Jeff, thanks very much for your time.
Hey, Rachel, good to be here.
Just for context and to reiterate here, the man who introduced the Kill the Gays bill in Uganda is a member of the family, yes?
Yes, it's a young member of parliament, David Bahati, a rising star who has been over to the United States for our National Prayer Breakfast and has taken something of an organizing role in the Ugandan National Prayer Breakfast and has been involved with the family for some time.
Now, as I understand it, you have some new reporting today about when and where Mr. Bahati first announced his intent to introduce the Kill the Gays bill.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of us have focused on that March Kampala conference and the idea being that the Ugandans sort of got this idea from Scott Lively and Richard Cohen and so on. It seems David Bahati was thinking about this before that, as far back as the October 2008 Ugandan National Prayer Breakfast, where he floated the idea in a private meeting. There was some pushback. It's important to acknowledge that a lot members of the family sort of expressed some disapproval of it, but in the balance, as one family associate explained to me, there's always a balance between access and accountability, access to power and holding power accountable, and in that instance they seem to prefer continuing the access to power of these Ugandan officials rather than stepping in and nipping that thing in the bud.
So just to be clear, I mean, we have a national prayer breakfast here in the United States that is run by the family. It's become a very mainstream event. It's something that the president speaks at. The Ugandan National Prayer Breakfast is also a family event. It's run there the way that it is here in America.
Yeah, I spoke today actually with the family member who helped set it up. This year was the 11th annual National Ugandan Prayer Breakfast, but he actually was working on it in the early 90s. I should say he started with the best of intentions, but it's really, again, one of these illustrations of where things can go awry when someone like David Bahati or Baturo or these politicians who are backing this see this sort of American export and use it as a vehicle to take American culture war to extreme ends.
Do we know if there were any Americans present, any American family members or any other American elected officials that were present at that National Prayer Breakfast in Uganda when Mr. Bahati first floated this idea of executing gay people?
Yeah, there were a number of American family members, family activists who working in Uganda who were at the Ugandan National Prayer Breakfast. The keynote speaker at the event was an American Christian business consultant who runs something called Jesus Christ Quality Management Consultants, and also the Institute for National Transformation. President Museveni of Uganda promptly signed Uganda up for one of these institutes after the event. But also possibly present, we haven't yet been able to confirm this, is Senator James Inhofe, who's been especially active with the Ugandan National Prayer Breakfast. He goes there about twice a year. He's gone to many of the breakfasts. The Ugandan family associates thank Inhofe for his wisdom and insight and helping making the Ugandan National Prayer Breakfast what it is.
It's one thing, Jeff, just in the big picture, to think about something bad happening on a human rights issue in another country. The reason that this is a big story in the United States, or at least I think it justifies all the time that we've given it on this show, is because it does seem to have a real American inflection. And if Americans, as you say, do have a lot of access and influence, that ought to have accountability come with it. And so I have to ask, if the idea of executing gay people, executing people for being gay in this country, in Uganda, was floated at a family event. This proposed legislation was introduced there. And this Ugandan legislator who proposed it is a member of the family. And the Ugandan ethics minister who is supporting it on behalf of the Ugandan government and president is also a member of the family. What's been the reaction inside the family here in the United States about this being proposed?
Well, that's actually where the really big news is. I think there's almost a schism within the family. There's the Ugandan branch, which is actually promoting the bill, and then there's men like Bob Hunter, who actually sort of helped build the family relationship with President Museveni, but is very firmly against the bill, has been sort of quietly working against the bill, and trying to reach out to the family's political allies, like Senator Inhofe, Senator Brownback, and get them to step up. And they, unfortunately, have been resistant to do so. In fact, they have this influence in Ugandan government, but now they're saying, well, we don't want to interfere in Ugandan affairs. That hasn't stopped men like Senator Inhofe or Congressman Pitts from interfering with things like condom distribution in Uganda. They've been very active in the most intimate details of Ugandan life. But on this issue, they're stepping back, while some other members of the family are really drawing the line here. And I think that's important to recognize that across the spectrum there is a lot of opposition, and the family could have a really great impact on this if they are able to marshal the influence and power they have there.
To be clear, just in terms of our reporting and trying to get to the bottom of this, we have spoken to a number of the offices of a number of elected officials, conservative politicians here in the U.S. associated with the family, and while a number of them have told us they're against this bill, not one of them has said they would do anything publicly to stop it in Uganda. Jeff, I have to ask you about one last thing, and I know you talked to our producers about this earlier today, and this may be the single most inflammatory thing we have reported to date. These Ugandan kill the gays guys, the guy who introduced the legislation and the guy who's mostly promoting it in the government, the minister, the ethics minister, they're planning to come to the United States next year?
This February for the American National Prayer Breakfast. This will be, if it happens, it will be a repeat for David Bahati, the man who's introduced the bill. Now, here's another interesting sort of element of the schism within the family. Baturo and Bahati think they're coming. Baturo told my researcher that he was coming. Bahati has a whole agenda laid out. When I spoke to family associates today, they said, well, that may not happen. So again, you keep that pressure up. There's a possibility that the family might actually use its influence and not disinvite those guys from coming to the American National Prayer Breakfast.
And if not, there's the prospect of the American president speaking at an event before an invited audience that includes the guy who introduced legislation to execute people for being gay in his country, with the support and encouragement of American quacks like ex-gay fake therapists. Wow. Jeff Sharlet, contributing editor to Harper's Magazine, author of the book The Family, The Secret Fundamentalism at the Heart of American Power. Great reporting on this story. You've got amazing sourcing on this, as always, Jeff. Thanks very much for sharing it with us.
Thank you, Rachel.